Morty, we've got to turn the project in early.
Good morning, Cameron. Good morning, Jaden. How are we doing, everybody? I think I got the music back going. I do. I got the music going. I feel like I'm blurry. Might try something with the camera. Because it does autofocus. Should we try to fix the camera and not have it do autofocus? What do you think? Might try this. Can I get the... Let me see if I got the camera going here. I'm going to turn off the autofocus. Up. Is it not? There I am. It's actually better on here without the green screen. And that's what the bummer is. The green screen does it. Autofocus off. Oh, wait, literal. Oh, no. wait, here we go. There we go. Can I find adjustment it? Oh, that's moving the camera up. We don't want to do that. Okay. How do I fine adjust this? I think it's got it. There we go. I know, right? I turned off the autofocus. I think it's good now. I wish it had a bigger, like, it'll let you, like, do the... I just want to... No, that's moving the camera again. Right, I think it's good now. They probably won't save the setting because we need to... Oh, good. Let me save this. Oh, focus mode manual. Okay. Focus. And that's going out. Let me write to this preset. I think we're good. Now, you know sometimes I go in and out of focus. So if I put my hand forward, it won't get confused now. And they've been teaching me how to use this. Let me go one lesson. Oh, that's better. I have to watch like hairs on my head. What's interesting, here's the camera. Let me see what it looks like. Yeah, you see, so with the green screen, it looks better. You're seeing all the behind the scenes now. So you can actually, it looks a little bit better, but because I'm being green screened, you lose some of the stuff. Anyways, that's what's going on right here. I figured I'd get it fixed. So I was like, you know what, I should fix this now. Let's head back over here. Okay, let me remove out the background. Okay, so we got the preset in. It'll always do this. Now I won't go in and out of focus, which it sometimes does. It's because I'm not moving around. That felt illegal to see. The green screen effect. So now you're like, he's not got this world behind him. So for real, right there, secrets. But thank you to, once again, everyone who helps make this possible. It's really a team effort here. What should we do? Should we do some Pearson? What do you want to do? Is your time right now? Is your time? What should we do? What should we do? Quiz 13. Let's start with some quiz 13. What time do I teach? My parents are in town and they might come see me teach. I was a good egg and started early, so I'm good for anything. Nice. My Pearson's saying bad portal right now. There it goes, it's working now. My parents might come see me teach. When's the project gonna be dropped? Soon. Project coming out, should be like this weekish, I think. I'll ask Terry. Like, Terry, when's the project gonna get here? This is my stress release before I have to go to speech. Nice, I'm glad we got chill music right now. I think the chill music's playing. Awesome, we had Thanksgiving this weekend, so it was a busy weekend. Family was in town. They got to see the new home and everything. Can we do the environmental agency? Let's do that. I got the quizzes going up in the background here. Just relaxing before we get started. Environmental agency, do we have time to go over the most missed questions on exam 2? Kind of, well, we can. We do that towards the end. But exam 2's over. So now starts with insurance company. Yeah. We're gonna focus on this, then we can swing back around and get it. So confidence interval for sample proportions. We're gonna focus in on these right here. We got 2 questions up right here. Insurance company and environmental agency. So those are the biggies, the big ones. Okay, got the timestamps. Pew Research, insurance company, environmental agency. Insurance company, environmental agency. I'll see which one I see first. Insurance company. Thank you so much. It's doing really well. Really nice. Insurance company, environmental agency. Where is it? Must be towards the end. Environmental group? Environmental, is it environmental group? Is it this one? Give me a yes or no. Is it this one right here? Is it this question right here? This is question 14. Tell me if it's this one. Environmental group. That one? Insurance company. It might be question 14. We found the insurance company one. So this is, we are at the mark right here. 8:23. Stat 201. Everyone's stat 201 though. Like usually we used to have 320s come in. 320, where you at? Chapter 13, quiz and insurance company. Let's do this right here. Okay, so what's the first thing we do whenever we get to these questions? Yeah, that might be it. We'll find out. We'll do that one next. You got it. So what's the first thing we do when we get to one of these questions? The very first thing when you get to one of these questions is you do what? Your notation. I'm going to grab the notation here, put it on a new sheet. So whenever you get to these questions, you want to do your notation. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm getting a Word document open. Cat or quant, I like that too. Actually, yeah, you want to figure out that first because that's going to figure out. Step 1 is panic. No, don't panic. So here's the thing. If you get good at these questions, you don't need to read anything from my Pearson. So your goal with these questions is to not read anything from my Pearson. Does that make sense? Don't read their questions. Just look at what they want you to do and then do it. We're going to do this whole question here without looking at what my Pearson says because it'll help us remember the steps. So if you want to use this to review later on, this is how we make confidence intervals for the true proportion. We'll put a note up here. Making confidence intervals for the true proportion. Making confidence intervals for the true proportion. Doing it and following these steps will answer every question. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to, 1, mark our notation. So I need your help in the chat right here. We'll start throwing out some points. I think Mubot's awake. He is awake. Start marking that notation. Tell me any notation you see in this problem, but we're going to start marking the notation. There's a lot of notation to mark. It may look like only a little. Yeah, there's a good bit. There's a good bit to mark. Start telling me. Figure out the notation for the true proportion. Might help to know the equation, p hat plus or minus z score times p hat times q hat over n. I'll write that down in a moment. But what is some of the notation in my head is blocking one of them. Well, we got to figure out cat. Ooh, I like that first. Let's say part 0 here, cat or quant. So step 0 is cat or quant. So step 0 is cat or quant. We got to know if it's cat or quant. He should make an appearance today at some point. And it is categorical because we are dealing with the true proportion. I got to throw some points for that. So categorical is for proportions, not the true that matters, it's the proportion. And we've got here some notation right here. So now we're doing the notation portion where we start marking. And there's a lot more to mark. There's a lot more to mark. Let me throw some points in the chat. Good job. Samantha's got p hat, it looks like. So we'll find p hat. And I think there's at least 2 more things to mark. So what other 2 things are there to mark? So I'm going to start writing the notation down. And keep thinking as we do this. Keep trying to get it. So we have x, which is the amount of successes. It's not the variable x, it's amount of successes. Over n, which is the sample size. And this will give us p hat is x over n, which is the amount of successes in a sample. Always try to think of an example for yourself of what this means. If you have 30 friends and 15 own dogs, what is p hat? Someone just type that in the chat real quick. Like, I have 30 friends, 15 of them own dogs. What is the proportion of my sample friends who own dogs? Like, I took a sample of 30 friends, 15 own dogs. Get that like that. Samantha's already got one of the last things right there. I think that's it, actually. Yep, people are figuring it out. The last thing, which I took for this also, is the z-score. And that is a z of 1.96. And that other question was 50% for the p hat of the sample friends who own dogs. If you're wondering how we got the z of 1.96, it comes from the percent confident you are. So you have to go to the apps on the screen, which I'm pinning that message currently. So you'll see the pinned message at the top of the screen, and you have to go here. It's already set up for 95% confidence. And there's the z-score 1.96. I suggest carrying 2 or 4 decimals. Good news is this one, generally 2 works. If you want to be really safe, do 4. Let me see, I'm going to message my parents. Few seconds. They're going to come see me teach. Okay, exciting. W parents right there. So here's how we get it. You can enter in 90, make sure it's the in-between. This is what a confidence interval is. Hence, you get the lower bound and the upper bound right there. So they got Wordle today. So with this right here, that is how we get the z-score. Make sure you're doing 95% confidence because the question says so. And notice how it goes 80, 90, 95. We'll get some more bunny videos, Lauren. That'd be excellent. I like that. So you'll mark the notation right here, but now step 2 is not going to be to solve for the interval first. What should you do before solving for intervals? Before solving for an interval, what should you maybe do? What would be a good idea to do before solving for intervals? Before solving for intervals, you'll be given the z-score, yep. So what would be a good idea to do before solving? You can find the standard error, but before we do any math, we should probably make sure we're doing the right ideas. So what should we do before we, what should we, kind of check conditions. So I would say check conditions. We have to make sure random. What's the next condition? Random. We're listing everything out we would do for this problem right now. We're listing everything out. We're solving this whole problem by doing it step by step. Random and percent, and then we pause. So we're going to put a thing in here. We're going to put a pause because we don't yet say the third condition yet. We make sure we know if it's cat. So we'll put success failure right here because it is categorical. Success failure. And now we need to talk about each of these conditions. So we're going to put a little color coding right here with the pause. That's where you look back at the start. Everyone see we're preparing for the test by doing this problem. We're not just learning how to do this one problem. We're seeing how to do any problem like this and the steps you would need to do. And sometimes we break apart the steps into different questions. So this is like first check if it's cat or quant. Step 0, like what are you doing here? We're doing a confidence interval for the true proportion that's categorical because proportions is what percent of people are in this group. Then we mark our notation. Then we check the conditions. It needs to be a random sample, less than 10% of the population, and then we have at least 10 successes and at least 10 failures. How many successes do we have? So the success failure condition is now NP hat, and we'll do a little P hat on this. So how many successes do we have? What does NP hat solve for? How many successes do we have? How many successes? 81, exactly. So we have 81 successes, and that's because NP hat, we can solve for P hat in a moment, but it solves out to exactly 81, which is exactly X. So that's NP hat right there is going to be greater than or equal to 10. Don't worry if it's exactly 10. We try not to do that to you. If it's exactly 10, then you just go, let's do it anyways. So now we have NQ hat, and which is going to be the smaller one, NP hat or NQ hat. And plug in your numbers right here. We've already got P hat marked. We didn't solve it out. I think Sarah said it earlier. P hat is going to be, I'll trust their math. There it is, 0.14. Ooh, there's one thing we're missing. Oh my God. What is the one thing we're missing? What is the one thing we're missing still in this problem? Said we had a few more things. We have p hat, and I gotta scroll back down to the text. Q hat, yep. There's Q hat, which is 1 minus p hat. Use p hat to get Q hat. Q hat's the bigger one, so you really only have to worry about p hat, but that's it. So now we have, the next thing we're gonna do is we're actually gonna solve for the interval right here. So now let's go here to, let's go subindent, and let's go solve interval. So the equation would be on your formula sheet right here, so make sure to have the formula sheet. There we go. And the equation is p hat plus or minus z star, which means you get to pick it related to the level of confidence. And then the standard error is p hat times q hat over n square root of the whole quantity. So all we're going to have to do now is plug in the values we found to get the answer. So the answer is going to be 0.1452 plus or minus 1.96 square root. Oh my gosh, I'm going to round this. It probably will still come out right. So I am rounding that for the time being. But we get a formula sheet on the test. Yep, you get a formula sheet. If you want to go see the formula, it might be posted. I don't know if Terry's posted it yet. I could go find it. Look for review 3 to see if it's posted right now. I hope it is. It'd be nice if it is, but it'll be coming up later, it says. But it has all the formulas. So now we're just going to go ahead and solve this formula. So make sure to walk through the solve. Be careful here. It's p hat times q hat over n and square root of that whole quantity. I think my parents think I'm not teaching. So I'm going to go 0.15 times 0.85. There it is right there, divided by 558. We've now found the standard error. Make sure to square root it. I'm putting it there because that's the standard error. Next thing we're going to do is going to times it by 1.96. And pause right here and realize at this point, which this is about 3%, you've now found the what. This is everything after the plus or minus. So you've now found the what in your problem. Important to know the components of a confidence interval. You've now found everything after the plus or minus. You've now found the margin of error, So the margin of error is about what percent? The margin of error is very close to what percent? If you look at this right here, the margin of error is super duper close to what? The margin of error is super duper close to what percent? 3%. So if you look, it's basically 0.1452 plus or minus 3%. We're going to round it and hope that the problem doesn't get mad at us. I would carry all your decimals. Some of them want 2, 3 decimals, 4 decimals, sometimes 7. We saw a problem like that. But we'll put this in. We'll see if it likes it. We'll carry more decimals. Make sure to carry your mathematics out as you do this. Last but not least, what you're going to have to do on the final is you're going to have to take your interval and what it. What are you going to have to do to your interval here after you make it? So after you make this interval, you try to get on the other side of it. Oh my gosh, we're never going to get on the other side of it. We'll do this. You have to interpret it. Cameron, great job right there. Interpret the interval. So interpret the interval. So we say, I am blank percent confident that the true blank we'll do this so everyone knows is contained in the interval blank to blank. So right here, the confidence level, do another highlight on this. The confidence level, which is 95%, or we already shaded that as pink right there, or because it's part of the notation, we'll do a circle around it. That's where you put your percent confidence level. We did a circle around that. The upper and the lower is going to be basically about, we'll put it right here and put it right here. It's plus or minus 3%. So it's going to be about 11.5% to what? So what is the lower is 11.5. And we could say that as a percent right now, 11.5% to about what? Round it upwards. Look at the plus or minus on it. I'm doing a round on this. But what's the upper of the interval? So the lower is 11.5 and the upper is what? So the lower is 11.5 and the upper is what? Because this is like 14.5 right there, like if you do that. And this is 3% right here. So yes, 17.5. And we're doing a round. Make sure to carry your decimals. You're just going to add and subtract that number right there. Look at how it's symmetric around 14.5. Do you see how it's like 14.5 minus 3, 14.5 plus 3? Does that make sense? Like, oh, it's a margin of error. 14.5 plus or minus 3%. And we rounded the decimals a little bit. The hardest part for people is this part right here. This part, you are going to have to pick between either the true proportion, the true mean, or the true difference in means. So the true proportion, the true mean, or the true difference in the means. And so because we are doing proportion, and we're doing the proportion of people, random teenagers who are at the wheel, we're trying to see the proportion of time teenagers are at the wheel. So I always ask you to do this. If you're at home doing this right now, this is practice for the test. It's the proportion of time teenagers are at the wheel when there's an accident. So I want you to give the interval interpretation right here. Try to fill this out. Did I get it? I am 95% confident the true proportion of teenage auto accidents is contained in the interval. Boom! Samantha right there, you did it. As I was asking, I look up and you're like, Samantha already did it. Samantha, we're throwing 50,000 crazy points out here. Samantha, keep it up. We need to make new levels all the time because I've been destroying the point system here. But Samantha, that's 100% right. I am 95% confident the true proportion of time teenagers are at the wheel during accidents is contained in the interval 11.5 to 17.5. So if someone thought 20% was true, would you think 20% is true or would you doubt 20%? So press X to doubt, or what do you think? I am 95% confident the true proportion of teenagers that are at the wheel, true proportion of teenagers at the wheel. X to doubt right there. I'm sorry, but I cannot push X. Oh, Mubot is not pushed. Oh my gosh, he can't doubt right there. Mubot cannot push X. Mubot even just replying in right there with the doubt. We got so many extra commands. Okay, so now we go look at our question and we follow through with what we did. The interval, and it wants percent, so we're going to hope that our rounding worked right here. There's the numbers we came up with. I am 95% confident the true percent. Notice how this says randomly sampled, but this one doesn't say true, so this is much like ours. I am 95% confident. Yep. You know what it means? It means 95% of 95% confidences will contain the true proportion. That's what intervals do, is 95% of 95% confidences contain the truth. A politician thinks that 1 in every 5 would be 20%, so I don't think that's true. The interval contradicts because it's outside the interval. The interval does not contain the figure. Looks like, oh my, what? What did I do? How did I do that? There we go. So we did it correctly. I know, Sarah, thank you so much. Sarah, some points in the chat. I didn't notice it till I got one wrong, and I was like, what have I done? So good work on that one. And if you followed all the steps, does everyone understand that we just literally, how much of the lecture did we cover right here by filling out this sheet and doing this? So we could say any value outside the interval we reject, which sometimes they do that. Any value outside the interval is not believable. And that'll come into play as we talk about tests. We just did like all of it, right? 16 minutes or 18 minutes. Nice, almost 2 million points. I love it. Basically, most of the lecture was covered by this one question. So then we're going to continue the steps here. People said the environmental agency question. Let's go do that one. But if you can follow along and then do these steps, don't worry about what my Pearsons ask you. Remember, you're practicing for the test. You want to know how to do these questions. So try writing down the steps and then answering the My Pearson questions to see, you know, like, do I know it's going to do? Ooh, it's environmental agency right here. Oh, this one's a mathy one. Okay. Not the biggest fan of this question. We rarely write test questions like it, so let me mark it in the notes. I believe this is the one people want me to do. Remind me if not. There's another one with women sampling or something like that, but this one, it's an all right question. It's just very algebra. So SNAT 201, Chapter 13 quiz, and environmental agency. Okay, so with this question right here, what's the first few steps we're going to do? I should like print this off and like give you a sheet every time. That's the real way to do it, is like print a ton of copies with these steps. Oh my God, what are you doing here, man? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out cat or quant, and an environmental agency worries that there may be cars violating emission standards. Is that quantitative or categorical if a car is violating emission standards? So I know you might be like, well, how much of pollution are they putting out? Well, we're thinking it either violates emission standards or it doesn't violate emission standards. That's what they're doing. They're asking like what % of cars violate emission standards. Like that car, yes, violates. So that's the hint right there. Yes, that one does. It's categorical because either the car does or does not violate emission standards. And if it does, that's a categorical yes. If it doesn't, that's a categorical no. Hence, this leads to proportions. Hence, we're doing it right now with this chapter. So now, after we've identified cats in the chat, we're going to go with what? We're going to go with what sort of step next. We've already done cat or quant. Oh my gosh. I need another one. I should do that, Jaden. Jaden, I'm gonna try to put a MooBot in right there. I shouldn't. I was gonna have MooBot say for cat or quant, but I don't want him to say it all the time. Okay, right. No, this okay. What should we do next? What's the next step? While Brian's having fun over here, tell Brian the next step. The next step is to do what? Okay. Next step is to do what? Everyone's having some fun. Notation. So MooBot's got a new command. So we got new command from MooBot right here. Notation. I see that. I see this. I see this. I see that. Okay. So now we see different things, different numbers. Let's identify what they are. I'll do this one a little bit. Not one of my favorite questions. It's very mathy. So the big thing to know here is notation. This means the margin of error is equal to 0.02 as a decimal. Can anyone identify any of these as I do this? And then I'll show you how I got that. While you're putting the other notation in the chat, the z-score, the reason the z-score gets a star is because it's relative to the confidence level. So when you see the confidence level, that's related to the star on the z-score. It won't always have a star. Great job, William, right there. So that's the z. And technically, it has a star because it's relative to a confidence level. So to get that, we'd have to go to the app again, make sure app is currently pinned in the chat. If you don't see it pinned, it's going to appear in the chat now. Make sure to bookmark it, really helps out. And then you'd go in here and enter 90%. Technically 1.6449, but 1.645 also works. The other notation currently on the screen is usually where people get tripped up because you have to use the notation because you've got, frankly, we can figure out this really quickly. The problem was really nice to us. So what's the notation on the screen? You got it. William's already got p hat right there. Nice job. Can you consumer advocacy? Yeah, let's do it next. You got it, Catherine. And so this is x, and this is n, and p hat is x over n. Hence, this is 14 over 70. And q hat is 1 minus p hat is q hat. And then just plug in the p hat of that right there, and you get that this is equal to 1. I don't like doing ones that way. 1 minus 20 right there. That's how we do it right there. And so now here's the issue. It wants to know the sample size that they need to get a margin of error of 2%. So it's asking, the question here is, we are trying to find what? It says, what is the sample size? So this is a solve for what problem? This is a solve for what problem? And then it says round up. Do not forget the round up. A lot of people make that mistake, and I do correct it if you miss it because you still did the work. So it says round up. What are we trying to solve for, though? N, you are right. We're trying to solve for n right here, which is the sample size. And so it's saying they want a 2% margin of error. Now here's the thing about this problem. The margin of error is everything after the what? The margin of error is everything after the what? Once again, repeating these things, remembering them really quickly, makes it easy when you get to the test to be like, oh, that's the margin of error. The margin of error is everything after the plus or minus, so guess what? This is the margin of error. So that's the margin of error right there. So you know what we can do? We can take our numbers and start plugging them in because we have everything right now but n. But before we do that, let's write it out here so that we have n being solved for. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to algebra this around. I'm going to divide both sides by z. And then after dividing both sides by z, I'm going to square both sides. And so by doing that right there, that's going to leave p hat times q hat over n. Now a fun trick you can do in algebra is you can just flip things. You can flip both sides and it remains equal. So by flipping both sides, I now get z squared over margin of error. And that's still squared. They're both squared. So I'm going to square the quantity. Squared over n's up top now where we want it to be. And do you see all we need to do now? All we need to do now to solve the equation is times both sides by p hat q hat. Shh, Meebot's just trying to talk away right there. So now the final equation is p hat times q hat z over margin of error and square that quantity, and that is going to equal to the sample size n that we were looking for. So we just algebraed that around. We plug in our numbers, 0.2 times 0.8. The z-score is 1.645. The margin of error is 0.02, and we start solving this. How are people doing on this? Does this make sense now? In purple is what we solved for, and that will get us the answers we need. So the purple is all I'm really focusing on right now. We just algebraed it. But how is that looking? So we're going to go 1.645 divided by 0.02. We're going to square that quantity, and then we're going to times it by 0.2. We're going to times it by 0.8. And very importantly, what is the answer? I know, right? Once you have the equation, you can solve this out really quickly now. Like this question every time just boils down to this equation. What is my answer though? Be careful. Remember the problem says round up. Ah, William, that's where, don't worry. I think they're nicer on this question now. I think they started putting in a margin of error on it because people were missing it. But since it says round up, it says round up right there. Since it says round up, we got to do 1083. Yeah, it's not that bad. Once you get it, you can just, like if you know the equation, you can just solve it really easily. So, and I think it accepts, they made it so it starts accepting more answers, yeah. I think people complain so much that I didn't get this one. I just saw him, I saw the cat named Quant. I should load him up today. Thank you once again to everyone. We got a webcam here now, all that fun stuff. But it's craziness. So you can solve these pretty easily, like if you have these numbers right here. So if you look at this and you say 99% confidence, then we want to take p hat is, wait, and 6% margin of error. So 2.5758 divided by 0.06, square the quantity, and then times by 0.2 times by 0.8. Oh my gosh, I did it wrong. 2.5758 divided by 0.06, and then square the quantity. There we go. I think I didn't square. I think I square rooted or something. And then times by 0.2 times by 0.8. And there it is right there, 295. Just make sure to do your algebra right. Complaining, what happened, Samantha? Is it just getting the problem done? So if you know the equation, it's not that bad. Like I've done it so many times, I've memorized it and I know my z-score is like that z-score is 1.96. So with this one right here, it says 5% margin of error, and so 1.96 divided by 0.5, square that quantity. Then take and multiply, oh gosh, 0.25, 0.75, and there it is right there, 289. So if you know the equation, you can solve this one in 15, 20 seconds. It's just the same equation every time. But more importantly, the key to this one is knowing the notation, knowing how z-scores work and stuff like that. So that's the key learning objective, I would say. I wouldn't put it on the exam though. I mean, it just had stuff kind of like it. Consumer advocacy group. Let's do the consumer advocacy group. Oh, I'm showing completed problems. This one's the exact same. This one's the exact same. The editor is preparing. It's the exact same question. It's 2 in a row that are the exact same concept. Consumer advocacy group. Do we not? Was it this one? No. A consumer advocacy group. Advocacy group. Okay. So once again, here's the thing we're going to do for this one, though. We are going to do our steps for solving this. Okay, you ready? So work along with me here because this is huge. If you can do these steps, you're probably ready for being tested on this. So follow along. If you do these steps, you will understand how to do these problems, mark notation. So get ready here. You know what we could do? We could take our sheet right here. And, oh man, I wish we could just erase everything that wasn't, it won't take but a second. Let me delete out the problem. Let me erase the screen here in a moment. Okay, so we've kind of got our sheet for this. And let's start it up. What's the first thing we should be doing? Look at this. Now we got the steps listed on the screen. me send this graphic to back. You are correct. We do notation. And before doing notation, we want to make sure we know if it's what or what first, though, which we've kind of already done because we know what chapter we're in. We're detecting if something is red snapper or is not red snapper. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to copy this. I'm going to save it and say, let me put this as a blank. Okay, 2 seconds. I'm going to say solving intervals or interpreting interval sheet. Okay, so if you want, write down the steps right here that we've listed, and I've got an interpreting interval sheet. So this is what we're going to do for interpreting intervals. Well, we got to be careful because it's not always the same third condition. So let me delete this. Let me save this right here because it's not always the same third condition. We have to be very careful on that. And so we've got it saved. We're good to go. And we're going to do a new sheet of it so I don't wreck this sheet and I can use it constantly. That way, when we come back to it, we can just keep using it. Okay, we're going to copy this. Can I copy that? It worked. Okay, we've identified that this is categorical because we're asking, is something red snapper or is it not red snapper? So that's categorical right here, which is also proportions. And so is it red snapper or is it not red snapper? Now let's mark the notation. What's the notation? What do we have right now? So if you can see the screen, make sure to mark it because I need to grab one more thing that we'll need. And there it is right there. What is the notation that we have? What notation do we have? Any of it? What do you got? I think you got all of it, basically. Great job, Cameron. And a lot of people get confused on this one because that is X, which is the amount of successes in a sample. Once again, if someone says 4 of my friends have dogs out of 8, that'd be 50%. And so this is N, which is sample size. X over N equals P hat. So P hat is 15 over 29. Q hat is going to be 14 over 29. What's interesting is I actually just checked one of the conditions. If you're working ahead, what condition did I actually just check right there? Yep, should be coming out pretty soon. Should be coming out this week. And this is a 95%, so 1.96. That is right there. So we will be hearing more about the project soon. So 1.96, and if you're confused how to get it, we've got the app pinned at the top of the screen. And so you would go over here to the stats applet. You would enter in 95% and get the 1.96 z-score right there. And that's when 95% of the curve has been covered in the middle right there. So we have all the notation, I think, right now. We know X, we know N, we know P hat, we know Q hat. Does anyone know what condition I just checked in pink right here? What condition did I just check for you right there? The next thing is to check the condition. Are these random fish? I'd hope so. Are they less than 10% of all fish? I would say that the fish we have right here, the 29 fish are less than 10% of all fish. 29 fish are less than 10% of all fish. And Cameron got it right there. 15 and 14 are actually going to be, after you do a pause and figure out what your next condition is. So the last condition right here, I don't know why it won't let me sub-indent now, but the last condition right here is going to be success failure, which is found by doing NP hat is greater than or equal to 10, and NQ hat is greater than or equal to 10, and we have 15 and 14 successes right there, so we have at least 10 successes and at least 10 failures, so we're good on that. And so we have that. We need now to solve the interval. So we're going to solve the interval right here. And we have P hat plus or minus Z star, which we already found. That is the Z star. And we need P hat, Q hat over N square root. That quantity right there is the standard error. And so now 15 over 29, right? Well, Cameron already put in the chat. So 0. Oh my gosh. square root. And n. I couldn't find n. Where's that? There we go. So we now have the mathematics. And so let's go right here, 0.157. I think I've carried enough decimals. Find out. What quantity, watch what I'm about to multiply by. What is that on the screen? 0.19. 0.19 is the what? Probably carried enough decimals, I think. 0.19 is the what? 0.19 is what I have on the screen. I just did square root of this right here times 0.19. 0.19 is the what? It said. Well, no one knows what 0.19 is. Margin of error, exactly, margin of error. So what we do is I usually re-express the interval now. Remember, it's 0.19 or 0.182. So it's 0.182. I usually re-express my interval as 0.517 plus or minus. Does that make sense to everyone right there? I usually do the estimate plus or minus the margin of error. You can see right here, this is the estimate. And then everything after the plus or minus is the margin of error. So the estimate plus or minus the margin of error right there. And then if I add it, I get the what of the interval. If I add this, oops, if I take the estimate and add it, I get the what of the interval. That's basically 70%. Basically 70%. I'm going to write 70% right here and hope it doesn't get mad at me. Or we'll do 69.9. We'll write down the number a little better. If I add it, what do I get? Adding the estimate to the margin of error gets what? It's the upper. It's the upper. And what you can do is you can actually subtract it twice. So you can go here and subtract, and you get the lower. Once again, we're just doing the estimate plus the margin of error, the estimate minus the margin of error, and we're getting the value down here, which is the lower. So 33.5. So what does this mean? What does this interval mean? I am what? Who can do it in the chat right here? So who can do it? Who can do it? What does this interval mean? Remember, if you can interpret this during office hours, you'll be able to do it on the test. When you're interpreting this, you want to make sure that you have the full interpretation down. What is the full interpretation? I am. And then we have to look at our level of confidence. How confident are you? I am. If there's the confidence. How confident are you? I am. Blank percent confident that the true blank. I am 95% confident the true proportion of red snappers sold are not actually red snappers containing the interval. Boom. Yeah, that's got Samantha. 100%. Great job. Once again, when you get to the test, it'll be super easy. Make sure to, here's the mistake people sometimes make, is they sometimes just put true proportion for everything. You want to make sure, which you were right, is true proportion because categorical. You want to think, is it prop? Is it mean? Because we'll start doing these. Or is it difference in means? So you are correct right there. You want to kind of pause also, look at the condition you just did. But it is proportion for right now because we're doing categorical. Later on, we'll do means and we'll do difference in means. And then we'll be able to identify those and know what to write for the question. A lot of people just put true proportion every time because they're like, well, that's the first thing you learn. So we start writing that. And then they forget it's not always true proportion. So right here, we met the conditions. There was at least 10 successes, at least 10 failures. Not 20, we don't do 20, we do this. It's less than 10% of the total. They do a good job. Right here, here's our interval, and it wants it as a decimal to 3 decimals. I think we rounded all right, so 3352699. I think that was the upper. I think it was. We'll see if it works. Explain what this means. I am 95% confident that the true proportion of red snappers, one is 95% confident, sold in, see, this is purchased for the study, which would be the sample. This is in the truth for the restaurants, so 33.5% to 69. I think we did this one properly. Let's cross our fingers because I'm worried about the decimals. Let's check answers. Hey, we did it. We did it. It's a little nice. There's some plus or minuses on it. I would carry all your decimals if I'm doing it. Doing a little, I'm putting the numbers, double checking. But we got time for one more. Which other ones should we do? We've done some of the toughest ones on here. So good work. And remember, we are doing like every step. Kind of request a level to be called ham and cheese Lunchables level. I like that. That is, ham and cheese Lunchables is some classic. That's been around since I was a kid. So editors, what is it's the editors of newspaper one, right? So that one's gonna be, we'll do it here. It's very similar to the previous problem. And so if you know how to solve it, you can solve it really quickly, but we're gonna do it here. And so that's my like hints and advice is if you know how to solve the previous one, you can do it pretty quickly. So let me grab this. We're gonna do 1.5 million is the ham and cheese level. I gotta see the points on it. Oh, I can see it here. Plus. All right, here we go. Ham and cheese Lunchables. Yeah, some ham and cheese Lunchables. There we go. Ham and cheese Lunchables levels, we got it. Let's go to the editor question. We might have time for one more after that. Here we go, editors at a newspaper. Now, how quickly can you get this problem? Mark it in the notes. How quickly can you get this problem if you know the tricks to solve it? If you know how to solve these problems, which I wouldn't memorize this, but if you know how to solve it, oh, I know the problem with this one. Yeah, this one has another trick. Pretty quick. All right, so one issue with this one is the first thing we do is we mark our what. What is the first thing we do? This one's a super tricky problem. I actually had an instructor ask me how to solve this one. So the first thing we're gonna do is solve our what, or find our what for this problem. For this problem right here, the first step is going to be to find our what. Find your what to begin with. Gotta look at a confidence interval for the true proportion. Notation. Where's Leo at?
Notation, brother.
So we need to get our notation here. And what do you notice we're missing? Because there's the margin of error. There's the z-score. Z-score is 1.645 because when you make a 90% confidence interval, you go over to the applet, which is pinned at the top of the screen. And on the applet, you will notice the 90% is 1.645. But what do you notice we are missing? Because we have the margin of error. Margin of error is 3%, so we'll write that right here. So what do you notice we're missing? So we would solve like we did for the last problem. Check out the previous problem, the environmental agency. We would have p hat plus or minus z star times p hat over q times q hat over n square root. And we are looking to solve for the margin of error and what has n solved for it. So the margin of error is equal to this right here. And we don't have p hat and q hat, right? So if you don't know what p hat and q hat are, so imagine I ask you, what percent of students like blah? What would be a good guess at the percent of students who like blah and the percent of students who don't like blah? Like what would be your guess if you really didn't know? Like the percent who like it and the percent who don't like it. If you had no idea, and that's why this problem uses these numbers. Because like if it doesn't give it, you should just assume what? It's like, I don't know what p hat and q hat are. Probably the safest guess would be what? The safest guess would be what? I actually put it in when I solved it. And that's what the instructor was like, how do you get these? And I was like, well, if we don't know it, we would just take a guess. And the best guess, and I'll show mathematically also, the best guess you could take without knowing anything, 50-50. I don't know. Also, mathematically, if you're thinking, well, why in the world would we do that? This will actually make this quantity as large as it can get. 50% times 50% is 0.25. That's what I entered in when I was solving, if you saw the quick solve earlier. But let's say we had 0.9, then q hat would be 0.1. Notice how it's smaller. So the more extreme p hat or q hat, the smaller the standard error gets. The standard error is the largest when you use 0.5 and 0.5. So some would say it's the most conservative numbers to use because you'd be figuring out you need at least a sample size of this to make sure you have it, because this will enlarge the standard error. So they might even get it with a smaller sample size, but they need a sample size of at least this because this is the most conservative value to use. So we did not know p hat and q hat. We just had to guess it. Does that make sense, Samantha? This problem is very theoretical. Like, it goes a bit beyond kind of what we teach. You'd usually have I guess you could say, well, we don't know p hat and q hat, so let's just guess 50%. But that's what it's doing. It's an interesting problem. And so now we just solve out. Check out the earlier problem here where I did the algebra right here to solve for the margin of error. The equation when you solve is p hat q hat times the squaring of the z-score over the margin of error. And that is the solve right there. I can show the other sheet, but with that, we went through the solve on this, on how to get it. And so the other sheet right here shows the algebra. I'll disappear. But there's the algebra right there, which solves out to p hat times q hat z over margin of error squared. And so that's what I did when I solved this, is I looked at the problem and I said, okay, let me find it. Calculator. It's a decent problem. It's more of a know your notation problem. Know how to understand notation, know how to use it, and then plug it into a formula. So p hat is going to be 0.5. Well, I don't usually solve that first. I usually solve this quantity. The z-score is 1.645 divided by the margin of error, which is 0.03. Square this quantity right here. We just squared it. Then times it by 0.5. Then times it by 0.5. And the answer is 752, which is it right there on the screen. Does that make more sense? I hope this problem's a lot easier now. If you get it, it's kind of a free question. If you know how to plug it in, that's why I like doing these office hours. And you'd be like, oh, that problem's not bad at all. I get this problem. It's just notation. Mark the notation, know the notation. Know p hat is the sample proportion. Q hat is the complement of the sample proportion. Z-score is related in a confidence interval, not always, but in a confidence interval. Z-score dictates to you how confident you are, the percent of curve you are covering. Not 1.96%, but the z-score of 1.96 relates to 95% of the curve covered, as the z-score of 1.645 relates to the middle 90% of the curve covered. So the z-score of 90, or z-score of 1.645 right there, relates to the middle 90% of the curve covered. Any other questions right here? Any other questions or thoughts? What questions or thoughts do we have? Well, we got class here in 23 minutes. 23 minutes till class. William's checking his points right there. Almost to 2 million. You're at the Lunchables level. You're at the ham and cheese Lunchables level. You're going to get to your... Lakin's checking their points. Jennifer, good to see you right there. Jennifer, wait. Jennifer, yeah, are you this semester? For some reason, I feel like you're... Like, maybe it's just been such a big semester. I'm like, Jennifer, are you previous semester or current semester? I feel like previous, right? Or am I just... You're like, no, Brian, of course. I am... No, you're this semester, I think, right? All of a sudden, I have this, like, memory. You are current. Okay, okay. Because once in a while, I'll have students join in, and I have to keep track of names. All the students will be like, Brian, I took your class 4 years ago. I'll be like, ah! It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool teaching online. Well, with that, well, thank you, Jennifer. Let's throw everyone some last few points. You notice we had Colin come by. He's at Disney. So we have students come by who are fan favorites. We have Calzone Tyrone is a fan favorite here. I think he's got one of the highest point levels. I think Jesse has higher points than him now, but Calzone Tyrone, fan favorite. He would come during our Cahoots. He was taking statistics in New York, like at a New York university. He joined in, Calzone Tyrone, and was playing along, and I think he came in like second or third in our Cahoots. But he would always see we were playing Kahoots, see we had him scheduled, and then he would join in the Kahoots and play and have fun with us. And everyone was like, how's on tow road? Everyone would be like cheering in the chat. We made him a mod on the channel. There's a few non-stats mods. We also had a person from Russia who used to come by. Can we get an accidental 100,000? Maybe during class, you never know. Gotta check it out. I'll throw you one more accidental 10,000 points right there. That was the best. I had copied 10,000 and I thought I didn't, and I put another 0 really quickly, and I was like, whoops. Okay, with that, we'll be back here shortly. Remember, keep working on problems, keep practicing, and understand the material. Bye for now, everyone. Bye.
Hey Brian, what's up?
Hey, Adam.
Oh, what's this?
Adam, what are you doing? Adam.
No! I'm Jason.